Let's pick up on that headline. Mr. Trump formally filed his candidacy papers just minutes before his formal announcement at his Mar-a-Lago property in Florida. Now, this sets the stage for a tough nomination battle for the Republicans, who are just coming off a poor showing at the U.S. midterm elections. So let's have a closer look at this developing story. Joining us from Singapore is Angela Mancini, partner and head of APAC markets at Control Risks. Now, Angela, Mr. Trump's announcement very much expected. But what do you make of the timing of this? Could it be him trying to preempt potential Republican rivals?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I also think, of course, he's looking at his legal cases. I think he's I would assume, quite disturbed by the press coverage that has been coming out about him following the midterms, including from supportive news agencies like Fox News and the Wall Street Journal. I mean, a few days ago, the Wall Street Journal had an op-ed entitled "Trump is the election's biggest loser." So I think indeed he is seeing that his popularity is sliding. He is seeing that donor money and Republican voters are looking for other candidates, and I think he's very much wanting to stay relevant in the conversation. Interestingly, some of his backers have said they really wanted anyone to hold off from making any announcements until after the runoff race in Georgia for governor, which is in early December. But he did not do that. He stepped right back into the limelight, albeit with a bit of a more lackluster energy and lackluster maybe support from the crowd that we've seen in the past. But he's definitely in the conversation now.
Let's talk about his possible rivals. Former Vice President Mike Pence just making comments about having better choices than Mr. Trump. Do you suppose he's talking about maybe himself or possibly Florida Governor Ron DeSantis? Are they strong contenders, maybe stronger than Trump?
Yeah, I think Mike Pence would love to have a shot at it. Certainly, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is the primary frontrunner after Trump. There's also Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin, who's been getting a lot of Republican donor money and donor press, or Republican press as well. But I think the thing to note is a Politico poll came out just in the last day or so that shows that indeed that Republican voters still do back Trump more than they back DeSantis. I think Trump was 47%. Versus DeSantis is 33% as it related to Republican voters recently commenting on that. But, his popularity is sliding, and it's harder for him to run this time. He's got a record this time, unlike last time. He's got the January 6th baggage. He's got all of his legal troubles. We've got his age to consider. He would be 78 if he took office, which is just shy of Biden, but he's still quite old. So there's a lot of, it's going to be harder for him to mount a campaign and a successful campaign this time, especially when you have quite a number of donors and GOP leaders and voters saying that they do not want the toxic politics. They want the platform and the policies. They don't want the toxic politics that we saw with Donald Trump.
Could you give us an idea, given the poor performance of the Republicans at the midterms, how strong is support for Mr. Trump within the senior GOP ranks?
Yeah, it's a bit mixed. I mean, it was pretty extraordinary to see how quickly, again, the media, Fox News and Wall Street Journal, his traditional supporters, and some of those senior GOP leaders were really cutting him loose. I mean, we saw everyone from Mike Pence to Tim Ryan, on down the line, making comments saying this is the third election that he's cost the Republicans just by, again, being toxic, keep talking about election deniers. I think his candidates he backed, the non-incumbent candidates, for example, for governor, who were election deniers, were 0 for 15 in the actual results. So I think it's quite mixed. But I do think it's something to watch, because in looking at the Fox News coverage, just even in the last couple of hours, of the announcements of him running, it's quite middle of the road. So the idea of the media saying, the Republican media saying, Trump is the biggest loser of the elections, we may see that quickly recede, and we may see the Republican, again, leadership and donor money and media kind of coalesce a little bit more around it. But I think it's going to really depend on what's happening actually with the voters, because the Republican voters did not come out for his handpicked candidates. We saw that they did not. So the candidates who were hand selected more or less by Donald Trump got all the drama and the negativity of being associated with that drama in the campaign, with none of the upside. Those voters did not come out to put them over the top in race by race by race. So it's a real question, I think, as to what, how big is his base really? And then what that tells us then is what the donor money and what the Republican leadership going to then do.
Okay, and Angela, I want to go back to the speech. Trump, of course, is seeking a potential rematch with Joe Biden, but he started off by touting his previous accomplishments as president, although today it all seemed somewhat uncharacteristically underwhelming this time. What's your assessment? Who was he really speaking to?
I think he's trying to fire up his base. I think, when he has a strong, fired up base, then the other leaders in the GOP and again, the donor money kind of follow that. I think he was trying to reach out and speak about his record. And I think what's important here is when we saw a lot of exit polls from voters, Republican voters who did not vote for him or his candidates again, though they had in the past, what they were saying was, we like his we like his policies, we like his record, we do not like the personality, it's too narcissistic, we want to move on from that extreme toxicity in the Republican Party. And I think you notice he didn't in the announcement mention much about the 2020 election being stolen, the big lie, as it were. And I think that's because voters want to move past that. So I think what he's trying to do here is craft a message of, I had good policies and I had a good record. Let's look at that and maybe dial down some of the other drama. But I think what's important for Asia and what's important more, for business internationally is, if he does become a strong contender and even move forward and get the nomination and run and win, what does that mean for U.S. credibility and reliability in the region with things that we've seen as it relates to trade, climate change, the relationship with China, and of course, what's happening in Ukraine? We've seen in the past few years, Biden put forward some very clear policies and alliance building, and it remains a real question if Trump were to win, what that then does to all of this work that's been done in the past couple of years, and then what that means for uncertainty and for business in Asia.
Angela, thank you very much for that update. Angela Mancini, partner and head of APAC markets at Control Risks.